Welcome back to Wine Country at Work. I'm Ralph DeAmicis, and we're interviewing Eddie Heintz today, who wrote the wonderful book, Making Welcome, Enriching Life and Business with Hospitality. So, Eddie, tell me about some of the tools you think are necessary in hospitality.
Well, let me digress for just a moment. For many years growing up, I always was told as a manager for restaurants is that you hire for hospitality and then you teach them the skills because you can't teach people hospitality. And I always scratched my head a little bit about that and said, so I had this maitre d' one time. His name was Tom Dickinson, and I saw something in him, but he was very awkward with guests. He would, when people asked where the restroom was, he would clothesline them, by pointing. And so it was coaching him. And I was just about ready to give up and say, yep, you're right, Tom. This isn't your spot. And he walks in and he says, I get it. I said, you get it? He said, yes. Treat everybody like they're your grandmother. And I'm like, okay, let's go with that. We'll see what happens. Now he's coming out from behind the podium. He's taking ladies' arms. He's walking them. He's pulling out the chairs. He's really nurturing everybody that comes in. And I'm like, that worked for him, right? So we were able to he was actually able to learn. I don't know that we taught him anything, but he was able to learn what it was that we were looking for as a maitre d' position, right? So I started thinking a little bit deeper and digging deeper and what really is hospitality. It's about connection. It's about realizing that we have several suits of armor on. First of all, we know who we are as a human, right? So that's your first set of armor. The second is that when you come to work, you're usually putting on a uniform of some kind. So it's a second suit of armor. So there's no reason for us to ever take anything personally that anybody says to us, because A, they don't know us, and B, I'm not behaving as Eddie Heintz. I'm behaving as an employee of this wonderful establishment. So I realized that, okay, wait a minute, there actually are tools that you can use to teach them. And one of the biggest ones, in my opinion, is the realization that everybody that comes in is kind of in their own movie. They're the stars of their own movie. I'm not the star of their movie. I'm a secondary character, right? So whatever happened before they arrived to there was going to have an effect on how they present themselves to us. So if we can remain flexible and read that through connection, somebody's in a hurry, hey, you're here now, let's, welcome. Let's just relax a little bit and let me take you by the hand and get you where you need to be, and everything's good. You can now take a deep breath without saying those words. It's through your actions, right? So the question comes down to is, what kind of a secondary character do I want to be? So if everybody has their own movie going, even if you're a manager, you're not the star of the show. You're a secondary character in every employee's eyes. You're a secondary character in everybody else's eyes, right? So anything that they say to you, or it comes from them, has nothing to do with you. So again, why take anything personally, right? So other tools, such as not assuming, but actually asking questions. The antidote is to asking questions. And by the way, I didn't make these things up. There's a great book called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, who these are lessons learned from them. So I learned many lessons from Don Miguel Ruiz that applied to hospitality, not just life. Hence the subtitle here, Enriching Life and Business with Hospitality. Because for me, there's always been a blur between the two anyway. When does my life begin and when does my business life begin? It's all been kind of blurred, especially if you work in restaurants because you're working long hours. A lot of times you're taking care of your personal business while at work, and a lot of times you're taking care of work business while at home. So it's always been kind of a blur anyway. So why not incorporate some of the ways that I want to behave in my life into the workplace?
These are such great lessons. In fact, it's funny, it gives me a wonderful perspective about my own work as a tour guide, because I come from the speaking business, where I'm used to being the star. You know, used to being the person on the stage. And I have a good friend, Barry Smith, who runs a tour company as well. You probably know his license plate says Weissbit. And I always say, Barry, you're so much better at this than I am, because you're so much nicer to people than I am. I treat like my clients like my kids to a certain extent, you know, and that I kind of expect them to behave.
Right.
I watch out for them and I share information. But he's really nice to people. He really, I think, understands hospitality. And the perspective you're offering me really helps me like highlight the differences between the two. I really do focus on my clients and try to make them the star. But some of that early training, I think, overtakes me now and then. But that's a fascinating idea too, and I think the idea that to not take it personally, I think, is so important with people, because you never know what they're going through.
Right, and there's no reason to. I mean, when it comes right down to it, most of the people that we have them for 90 minutes.
Right,
you can do anything for 90 minutes.
Right,
you know, when it comes right down to it.
Well, it's funny in the tour business, we're with them the whole day, and usually I'm only with them in the times between wineries, so maybe 15, 20 minutes at a time. But sometimes you're with them much more. I work in multiple languages. Sometimes I'm translating all day long, so I'm with them all day.
Right.
And it's a very different experience, but you really kind of develop a much closer relationship with them, because, you know, they're a stranger in a strange land.
True.
Which a little bit is like that in hotels when you have people arriving. You know, you deal with people who are completely out of their element sometimes, and they're really looking forward to that space, that hotel room that they recognize. Now, as you're working with your team now, do you notice a difference with those who like come from the restaurant field and those who have come to like out of the wine field? Because you have a lot of people here who grew up hearing about wine at the kitchen table.
Right.
You know, do you notice a difference in terms of their styles at all?
100%. I learned early on, when I used to work at the Bounty Hunter. I was the opening manager at the Bounty Hunter. And we initially hired a bunch of wine educators, right? Because we thought that's what we're in the business of, selling wine. Let's hire people from the wine business. And that was great, except for when we got busy, because they were used to expounding on a wine. And meanwhile, 3 or 4 tables behind them are getting seated, right? So whereas restaurant people were used to multitasking and hitting second and third gear, so we had to have a balance, you know. So, and I'm not saying that I don't mean to pigeonhole restaurant versus winery, but to me it's a different discipline. You're trying to really hustle and get things done in the restaurant, in a successful restaurant, and with winery, you want to stop and make that connection a little bit more. So we hire both. You know, we bring on people who are in the restaurant business, and then kind of bring their energies down a little bit, and then we hire people from the wine room. Sometimes we have to energize them a little bit. So.
That's interesting. Like, it's funny, there's, at the top of the valley, there's a winery up there, and Gerard, in fact, and they had brought in a top somm. In fact, he had been in the movie Somm, and he had run a restaurant, I think, in Chicago. He was very, very talented man. And we were there with, you know, I had brought my clients there, and about 3 or 4 other tables were at the same time, 4 or 5 tables at the same time. And he was doing the entire thing by himself in a suit, a rather beautiful suit. And I was amazed by how good he was at it, at how flawlessly he was able to manage all these different tables.
Right.
And I don't come from the restaurant background. I mean,
well, and that brings me to a really good point. It's not the amount of time that you spend with them. It's the intention behind it. We had a friend that went to One Madison Park before it closed in New York. Voted one of the best restaurants. You could say world, but in New York for several years in a row, right? And he said, I asked him, I said, what was the most amazing thing? And again, it wasn't the food, right? It wasn't the service. He said, when the manager came up to the table and talked to us, it was as if we were the only people in the room. And that's really what it comes down to, is getting people to feel that, even if it's only for a few minutes. At one point in time, he said, I'm sure you're busy. I'm sure you've got other tables to go to. Thank you for spending time with us. He goes, no. Is there anything else anything else I can help you with? So he was there for them, and that until he wasn't, which was great.
Well, it helped. I think it helps people, especially if they've traveled themselves and they've been in other places, other restaurants. I mean, restaurant people love going out to restaurants. Mm-hmm. That's one thing I have found out. They love going to restaurants. And
Postman's holiday, right?
Exactly. But they appreciate it. I'm a little bit like that in the tour business. When I go someplace and someone opens a door for me. Yeah. Such a simple little thing. I'm so grateful because I open doors for people all day long. Part of the tour driver's job is to make it as effortless for them as possible. Mm-hmm. They should be able to slide. And besides, wine tasting's hard work, and you don't want them getting tired out. It does tire them out. But I think it helps the perspective. It's funny, when my daughter first came out here from the East Coast, she worked over at the Girl in the Fig, very good restaurant, and she had worked at the Cheesecake Factory on the East Coast. Mm-hmm. Very, very busy place. So she went to apply there, and the owner said, well, where did you work before? I said, the Cheesecake Factory. She said, you'll be able to handle this. But what I was most impressed with was that they went through a whole training program about the wines. Mm-hmm. Because they realized everyone who was walking into this place was going to be curious about the wines. And she had grown up in a family, had been around great wines, and she loved it. And she was also a great performer. She's a very gracious personality. But having her perspective of your daughter's perspective of what a restaurant is from the inside really changed my view of the whole restaurant. Those different perspectives.
Training programs are so underrated. You really need a good training program, or you're not going to get the best out of the people that you hire. You take all this time to hire them, and then you send them off into the wilderness, as it were, without a guide. Mm-hmm. And I think that we really need to focus on how we're training our staff members.
In your team, and this is always a thing about how much of the time are you spending on the education, how much are you just on the hospitality and making sure everyone has their glasses, and how much is spent on the sales?
We don't spend any time on sales.
Okay.
To be honest with you, what we try to do is list the wine, the story behind the wine, list its attributes on why I personally might like this wine or not, and ask questions like, what is it that you're looking for, and then let the wine speak for itself, and the sales happen. One of I don't know if I really want to tell this story or not, but one of my first duties in coming to was to eliminate the what are they called? The commissions. Thank you. Okay, the commissions, because I felt that people were treating the guests differently depending on, are they from Canada? Oh. Is he wearing a Rolex? What's going on here? And I thought that some people were not getting the full experience that we wanted them to. So what we ended up doing was taking the commissions plus hourly rate from the previous year, bringing that their new hourly rate, and then just taking commissions. Now that did two things. It helped us to establish a base salary, that a living wage that you could, regardless of the commissions, regardless of how the winery did, they were going to be there. And then everybody that walks in was treated much more equitably. Because you never really know if that couple, I come from Iowa, so you never know if that couple from Iowa that doesn't really drink wine is going to go back, and who they talk to, and who they tell the stories to, because you just never really know. So if you treat everybody well, then you're golden. And you never guess what happened to our sales when we stopped doing commissions.
Oh, I bet they went up.
Yep.
Oh, of course.
100%. Because we weren't trying to sell anymore. We were giving people an experience.
And the experience is everything. People don't realize it's about much more than the wine.
Correct.
The guest host experience is so important.
Agreed.
So.
That's you're preaching to the choir here. That's why I wrote the book.
Exactly. Thank you, Eddie. After the break, we're going to continue with another section of Wine Country at Work. Welcome to Wine Country at Work, the place where we talk about the wacky world of wine tourism and the very practical world of wine making that supports it. Today I'm talking with Zeqari Severance, who is a wonderful person who works in the industry in the tasting room. I met her there, and I thought that her approach to this was really unique. And what I really appreciated was the fact that she was part of the younger generation that is really changing the wine world in the North Bay, where for years we had so many boomers working in the field, and now we have a whole generation of young people coming in who are bringing in fresh palates and new ways of looking at wine that our generation didn't even think about. So she's very appreciated in our interview today. So Zeqari, thank you for joining us today.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
Now, I believe you're not from here. Where are you from?
I am not. So I just recently moved out here 2 years ago, August of 2022. I moved here from Columbus, Ohio.
So you moved here after the fires. That was very smart.
Yes, after the fires. My family is from here on my dad's side. He's born and raised in San Jose area. And so I did some time back and forth growing up and decided to make the move permanent as I became an adult. And yes, I absolutely love it.
Now, what did you study in school? What were your interests? What were you drawn to?
Yeah, so I went to school in Columbus, Ohio, at Ohio State University. I majored in political science. So poli-sci was my, and still is to some degree, my interest and passion. However, I have kind of shifted gears and wanted to kind of do something that was a little bit more lighter touch, and that's kind of what brought me into the wine industry.
Well, it's interesting too, because, as you probably have noticed as these tariffs went into place in the news, that how global the wine industry is and
Absolutely.
how much it's affected by politics.
Absolutely. Yeah. And still learning to a degree how everything is really in effects with what's going on outside of this industry. But it is interesting. However, the politics nowadays it's a little bit heavier than what it used to be. So I like the idea of going to work and being able to unplug once I'm off. I don't want to take my work home, and sometimes that's what the politics world can provide and bring you. So,
well, I imagine that part of your interest in politics was part of your interest in different cultures and
Yes.
people from other lands. And one of the great things of working in the wine industry, especially at the front end, is you meet people from all over the world.
No, definitely. You do meet people all over the world, and you get to expand and learn, and also make a difference. That's where my kind of passion came in. Was I really wanted to make a difference and help people and set policies and laws that would help the populations that needed help. And however, I witnessed. I did a position at Ohio State while finishing my degree as a research assistant with the homeless youth for 2 years. So when I did that kind of opened my eyes to a system that I realized what system I was working with. And I'm like, okay, wait, this is a little challenging here. So I kind of took a step back, and that's what kind of shifted gears. But when it comes to politics and wine, there's a lot to educate and navigate in these two industries and worlds, and it's pretty fascinating and intimidating at times too.
It's a very big business. The number of people who go to school for one thing and find themselves working in a different field, that's the majority.
Yeah,
in
no,
truth.
definitely.
And also what's interesting too is that if you look at it globally, so many places on the planet are primarily agricultural. The United States is down to about 5% of the people grow the food and make the wine for everybody else. But if you really look at global politics, a lot of it's about how people are fed.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And here in wine country, we're so conscious of how the environment affects those qualities, even to having to replant the grapes in different areas because the climate is changing.
Yep, and global warming, and I mean, considering fires and what's going on with that. I mean, there's definitely a lot more that you have to navigate with the constant change of happening with it, especially within the weather.
In terms of a personal preference, what convinced you to move from Ohio, which is the name actually means the beautiful. The Ohio River meant the beautiful river in the native language. What convinced you to move to beautiful California?
Yeah. So within the family, of course, being number one, and wanting to spend some time with my father and his side of the family out here, and just learn more. I loved, of course, the weather out here in California and Ohio are very different sometimes. Yeah, right. I know, it's no surprise. I mean, in Ohio, you have 4 seasons all in one day, and California, it's a little bit more consistent. But coming out here, I really just enjoyed the lifestyle, and just it has a little bit more of a more casual touch when it comes to West Coast compared to some of the East Coast and Midwest techniques and styles there, and. Again, really just enjoyed the environment and the mountain, the oceans, and just opportunity. There's a lot more opportunity in this industry, of course, in this state, more so than it is out there in the Midwest, especially where I am from. Very Columbus, not so much small, but it's growing. But definitely the opportunities are a little bit more limited out there compared to here.
Well, it was such a big industrial state, and such a big industrial state for so long.
Absolutely.
That shifting out of that has been a process for them. Oh
yeah, no, definitely. And you can see when I go back and visit, I definitely can see their industry growing when it comes to hospitality and the restaurant business, and especially the wine industry out there too. I mean, it's pretty fascinating. But I when I came out here in my free time, I love to garden. I love to paint. I'm a pretty creative person. And so when I came out here, my dad was like, all right, you need to go get a job. And I'm like, okay, where should I go get a job at? And he dropped me off at his favorite restaurant, Bistro Don Giovanni. And that's how I kind of jumped into this industry, and then, learned the fine dining, learned the wine. And that really was like, a light bulb went off. I'm like, this is it. This is pretty cool.
And they looked at you and said, she must be Italian.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, definitely within, some of the characteristics and my demographics there, they were like, what is your ethnic background? And I'm like, no, not full Italian. I do think I have a little sprinkle there from my dad's side, but just more so the passion, and I love history too. So it was like, oh my gosh, like wine, history, food, all the best elements come together. I mean, it's pretty cool.
You could pass for one of my cousins.
Yes, I love it. I mean, it's a beautiful restaurant. And, before coming out here, hospitality was my first job at 16, hosting, and at a very small casual joint is actually what they call themselves in Columbus, Ohio. It's this place called Roosters, and it's not the farthest thing from fine dining, but loved, engaging, talking with people. So coming out here, I just really try to take those skills that I used with that job and apply it within the fine dining. But it was great to be able to join the team, and learn things that I've never, food and dishes and cuisine that I have never experienced or learned. I mean, it was really, really an honor to be able to, jump in and kind of open up a whole chapter of things I did not know.
Do they have a training program on wines at Don Giovanni's?
They do not. So it's funny. When I started working there, I did not know how to open up a wine bottle. I didn't know how to open up champagne. I didn't know anything about wine other than white, red. Columbus, Ohio is really big on breweries and, like whiskey, of course, being there next to Kentucky and bourbon. So it's like, there is no wine education out there. And other than you have Sutter Homes, Behringer, your very, very easy, commercial wines that you can pick up there. So I, coming out here and working at Bistro, I was very intimidated, and, I was like, oh my gosh, like, the only thing I could really do is engage with these people and know how to talk to them. So that's what I'm going to use as, that's going to help me be able to learn. And I just went in, I would go in, early, show up, and, anytime that there was a training of some wine or, a new dish, I would be the first one there and trying to, take notes and just, any downtime educating myself. And that's when I was really starting to peel away more at this passion that I realized I had for this industry.
Okay. At what point did you decide, okay, we're leaving the restaurant and heading to a winery? What was the turning point do you think?
What was the turning point? I would say honestly, last year, I did a camp with Davies in Schramsberg. I did a harvest camp with them. I was able to get this opportunity to go work with them for about 3 or 4 days and learning about like the winemaking. And then I also learned a little bit about the history of Schramsberg. And I'm like, wow, like this is really, really fascinating. Like, I think I'm ready to pivot and go more into the wine industry and the wine world, and take away from food a little bit. So that was kind of where I was like, all right, where do I go from here? Where can I go to be a sponge and learn?
Yeah. And it's nice is that Carneros is your first location.
Absolutely. Yep. Carneros is my first winery. I did a tasting room for a little bit in downtown Napa to try to kind of be a sponge and learn some more, and just learn the style of how, the experience in talking and how that flow kind of was set up. And then I kind of put myself out there to do events. Anytime events would, go around in Napa, I would like, hey, if you need a bartender or somebody to come pour, I would be happy to do that just so I can, again, learn. And so that was how I was able to meet where I am at now. I did an event for them. And I was like, if you have a position that opens up, please let me know. I would love to be a part of the team. So they called me in January and they're like, can you come be a part of the team? And that's how we are where we are now.
Well, it was a very smart choice, being in Carneros, because I oftentimes say when you're down here, you're basically in Europe.
Oh, yes.
Because so many of the companies down here are European.
Yeah. And I didn't even know that, prior to joining the team. And I mean, there's so much that I'm still learning. I feel like this wine industry, I mean, there's so many layers, right? When you feel like you're at the top of the iceberg and you're like, okay, I got it. I've mastered some degree of this world, but then you're like, oh my gosh, there's another layer, here. And I mean, like every, culture and country, I mean, they all have their own style and technique, and it's really fascinating to learn that.
It's funny, I grew up with fine wines. My family didn't make wines, but we've made wines for generations, and I've read a lot about it. And I work as a tour guide and lecture on it. And then someplace along the way, I said I really have to read Karen McNeil's book. It's the Wine Bible. It's the book, and I picked it up, and the thing weighs like 15 pounds. And I'm big, but it still weighs 15 pounds. And so what I did was I bought the digital version. Oh. And I read that, which weighs only a few ounces. And you really can read your way through it comfortably and then have the book to look at the pictures. Yeah. And after being around wines for way too many years, I learned so much that I didn't know about global wines. And I thought I knew a lot. Yeah. And then I ran into that. And what's funny is she's really a wonderful writer. She's very funny. She's very witty. She's very coy. But most of the time that book sits on people's tables.
It's more like a little, for the aesthetic,
Exactly.
Yes.
But because it's so hard to read. But in the digital version, she is a wealth of knowledge, a wonderful writer.
Oh, that's awesome.
Now, as you've gotten into the wines of Carneros, which one? I hate to ask people, what are your favorite varietals? What are your favorite styles? But we all have our favorites. Yes. We hide them from the customers, but we do have our favorites.
Absolutely. My favorites right now, and again, this is definitely something that evolves. I would say, I'm a little biased within, being working at these, 2 lovely Italian restaurants in the past 2 years. I have been able to learn about some Italian varietals and wines, and I think that's where a lot of my my love is at. I love, of course, the Carneros Pinot and Chardonnay. I'm more of that European Old World style. So when it comes to the Italian varietals, I love a Nebbiolo. Nebbiolo is really nice. Or going, within the Piemonte, the Arnese grapes and Vietti, the producer there. I mean, they're really, really nice. nice. In Gavi, I really appreciate a nice Gavi as well. I like the more minerality and kind of refreshing finish for my white wines. And when it goes into the reds, I like the lighter touch of reds. And saying so, like a Nebbiolo or like a Pinot, a very light style Burgundy Pinot, or even a Russian River Pinot. I mean, I get pretty versatile with those regions of where the Pinot can come from, but that's kind of where my go-to is right now.
Wow, you can really learn so much about a person by finding out what kind of wines they like. So